Hey there you guys, so in this video I want to talk about Armored Core 6. Armored Core 6 for a lot of people is their first Armored Core game and it's their first mech action game. For me this is my first mech action game and this is my first Armored Core game. So it's been fun seeing like the conversation amongst a lot of people who aren't really familiar with this like genre or familiar with this specific franchise. Kind of just converse and talk. And one of the conversation points that I see that's starting to like come up very frequently is a lot of people dubbing Armored Core 6 as not just a hard mech action game, but as a harder than most Armored Core game. Now, I can't speak on it being harder than most Armored Core games because again, this is my first. But as far as it being like harder than most action games, I would say that that is very much true in the beginning, but after a certain point, it definitely not necessarily plateaus in difficulty or spikes down in difficulty, but just that you get so used to what the game wants you to do as far as like maneuvering, as far as switching out different components to your mech, etc., etc. Things like that that I feel like the game definitely gets easier on the player as the player gets better in skill. So in today's video, I kind of just wanted to go over like tips that I think might help people who've never played an Armored Core game, specifically as someone who went in struggling probably a lot of the same ways that a lot of the community is, with the fact that again this is such a different game to like our God of Wars or like our Devil May Cries or any other action game you could think of. This is definitely very different. Anyways, you guys, that's going to be the premise of this video. Do me a favor and like this video. If you guys like this video, please consider subscribing. Let's get into Armored Core 6. All right, the first thing I want to like address is switching out your different components to your mech. This is vital to how you're going to approach missions, how you're going to combat things, whether that be adjusting things like your speeds, the way you choose to fight, your rate of fire, etc. Things that I think a lot of people are used to, but probably not as frequently as Armored Core 6 kind of requires you to do so. The one thing that I do see that's starting to like trend is like a little bit of a misconception. I think a lot of people are struggling to find like the right build, quote unquote, for like this mission. And I definitely think there's builds that could help you do better on certain missions. I don't think it's that this one mission requires you to find this build and that's the only build that's going to work and you kind of got to like scratch your head around until you find it. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Just because I got through a lot of the missions with like definitely weaker builds than what I see other people online doing, I didn't think that the game necessarily forced me to get into like a specific build. I definitely think it's just like this is the mission and this is how they're going to maneuver and this is what you're going to be going through. Find a build that works for you in this moment, if that makes sense. So it's definitely more of a personal thing and less of a this specifically is the way you need to do it, which I see a lot of people kind of having again that misconception that I'm struggling to find the right build for this, etc. Find a build that works for you. Find a way to approach the mission that works for you. If you need some help, yes, there's obviously tons of like specific build like YouTube videos that'll help you with certain missions. But again, I don't think it's necessarily a requirement to say that every like mission has one specific build that you need to try to like figure out how to find or build out. With all that being said, I don't want to downplay the necessity to switch out your components, switch out your weapons. Think about like the opponent at hand and what are you struggling with? Are you running out of bullets before you could finish the fight? Are you like struggling to do like a lot of damage up front? Whatever the case is, find something that's gonna work for you for these missions and don't be afraid to like mess around and try different weapons. Maybe a weapon that you never thought you'd actually want to use. Like for me, sometimes it's a shotgun. I don't love the shotgun too much, but sometimes it is very useful for me. So again, experiment a little bit and have a little bit of fun with your specific builds. Next tip that I want to talk about is utilizing your mech's movements, utilizing your space. Something that I see that is very underutilized within players is the fact that they want to just stay on the ground and they don't want to like utilize their surroundings, whether that be going up in the air, going around them, reversing whenever you need to. Understanding that Armored Core 6 is a very omnidirectional combat system, which just means that a fight is going to take place in multiple different directions. It's not just two warriors on like a flat ground circling each other and parrying. It's more so dodging, maneuvering, which hits can you take and which hits can't afford to take. You know, there'll be some bosses where from the jump they're gonna rush you, so you need to have a plan ready. Are you gonna go in the air? Are you gonna go to the right? Again, utilizing your space, utilizing your boosters, utilizing again just your mech's movements, whether it be switching out your legs to a leg that moves faster. So what I would say is early on, especially in a lot of like the slower missions, take advantage of how you navigate your maps. Go out and like again, there's not a lot to like explore or adventure, but get used to utilizing your boosters, utilizing like, you know, your jetpack to go in the air, to go to the side. Just utilize how you maneuver these landscapes, because that's going to be so crucial when you're actually in like a pretty serious boss fight that like shoots a bunch of missiles at you and you don't really know where you should be going, you know, whether you should be going above it, and a lot of them are homing missiles, so they're going to like, you know, come at you wherever you go. So utilizing, you know, your boosters as far as like when to use your boosters to get out of like striking distance, etc. Do not be afraid to, you know, go into the air, go to the sides, stay on the ground if you must, get in close or stay far away. A lot of these bosses have like very specific like danger zones that you want to avoid. Learn those danger zones and then steer clear of them as much as possible. Next tip I want to talk about is utilizing like your garage menu. You have a lot of options in there, things like testing out your mech, doing like replaying missions. You can do arena, and the arena is one of the things that I think is so important. Do not beeline like the missions as far as doing the next mission, doing the next mission, doing the next mission. Try to go into the arena whenever possible, whenever new like arena fights pop up. I've been doing that, and it's making my life a hell of a lot easier, because then you get these like chips, and then you go to the OS and you can like tune up your specific weapons, your specific like expansions, stuff like that, that makes the game so much more easier when you have like that little one up on enemies. It'll open up more options for how you can not just maneuver, but how you can combat specific situations. Do not like, I know it's weird because this game feels very linear, and it is very linear, but there are some things to do on the side that's going to make that linear experience a lot more easier and honestly a lot more fun. Next tip that I want to like share with you guys is regarding the mission briefings. It's pretty self-explanatory that you want to listen to the mission briefings as best as you can. Try to pay attention. I know a lot of the like jargon gets a little confusing, but overall you want to know what you're going to be walking into and how you can best prepare for it. They give you a lot of like ideas, not just story like lore, but also just like ideas of what you're going to be walking into, so that you can better choose, like, do you need a gun with more ammo? Do you need a more heavy impact weapon? Whatever it is, you want to make sure you go into the objective with the best possible like assembly. And then once you do get there, make sure you pay attention to where your focus points are, where the next objective in this like mission is, because the faster you get it done and the less damage you take on your way there, you're gonna get rewarded for it a lot more once like you roll like the ending of that objective. You'll also see that there's a lot of objectives where the enemies are just there to be like fodder or like hindrance in your way to the goal. So understanding that some missions you can get done in literally like less than a minute if you just avoid a lot of the fights and you just like boost your way to the end and like clear out the like one specific thing they want you to clear out. It'll save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of like headaches as far as like wasting ammo on some of these weaker enemies that are again just in your way to be in your way. So just understand again the purpose of why did you start this mission? Why is your character trying to get from point A to point B? And clear it out as quickly as possible. My next tip is going to be a lot more specific because I feel like the other tips were a little bit more vague and a little bit more personalized. This is definitely a lot more of like how the game actually functions, specifically in combat and specifically in combat against bosses. And this is like understanding your HUD, understanding your different like stagger bars, your different like ammunition depletion, how fast you can deplete certain weapons. And just understanding what's available to you at specific times. And I think this is where this game is very different to most games. I feel like most action games, you want to deal as much damage as fast as you can. And Armored Core 6 is slightly different, where they want you to stagger the enemy, not necessarily like a Sekiro where you want to like parry them properly or whatever. It's more like doing damage throughout like a certain period of time without like giving the stagger bar time to deplete. So what I mean by that is if you use up all your like weapons immediately and you have the moment where you run out of ammo and all your things are overheated and you're no longer hitting the enemy until you gain like your weapons back, that stagger bar is going to take a lot longer to fill up, because what's happening is every time you do all those damage, you're like increasing the stagger bar, but then the second you stop hitting him, that stagger bar starts dropping back. So you want to make sure that you're not just hitting them consistently, but that you're not having those moments where you have to reload all your weapons, because that's going to make your time a lot harder as far as like actually staggering them. And then the second you stagger them, what I see a lot of people doing is they use all their weapons to stagger the enemy. And then the second the boss is like staggered and in a state for you to deal damage, they have no more weapons right now because they're busy reloading everything. Everything is overheated, etc. So making sure that not only you're using your weapons properly, you're using your ammunition properly, as far as like not using all of them at the exact same time. You know, maybe use your missiles, then switch to like your automatic or whatever. And then once you stagger them, that's when it's go crazy, do your high impact weapons up close. That's when it's like deal as much damage as possible until, you know, they come back, and then repeat the plenishing or increasing the stagger bar, etc. So something just to pay attention to. Make sure you're paying attention to your different HUDs, which weapons are working with which weapons, because sometimes you'll notice that your weapon combination isn't staggering them as quickly as you'd want, and you're either running out of ammunition or you're having too many moments where all your weapons have no ammo and it's taking too long to reload them. So understanding it's not always about how much damage you're dealing, but it's also about the rate at which you're dealing like consistent damage. I feel like that's more important in this game than it is actually like dealing heavy damage up close because you want to get to the boss fight faster. Consistency is definitely the key to this game, and it's consistency in moving, consistency in how you're shooting and striking the enemies, whether it's being up close or far away, whatever. Just to finalize that final note, make sure you're paying attention to your enemy stagger bar, your stagger bar as well, because they can stagger you, and you do not want to get staggered at a moment where they're about to rush you. That's going to be terrible. So paying attention to your stagger bars and also your ammunition and the rate at which you're depleting. My final tip for you guys is understanding that this is, again, a very different action game than a lot of people are used to, and it plays into the power fantasy like trope of those action games in a very different way than I think, again, we're used to. A lot of times, specifically with like From Software games, or specifically like the Souls games, is that they want you to feel the shit after you got the shit beaten out of you, and then you finally get to the point where you've mastered like parrying, you mastered like when to strike, you mastered like enemy boss patterns. This is not that game. This is not the game where they want you to necessarily keep repeating in the same way you do until you like figure out the patterns. In this game, they definitely want you to experiment a lot and test out different weapons, test out different components, different ways of maneuvering, way of traversal, etc. And I think that's a lot of the fun in this game. It's that when you find like a certain build that works for you for this mission, you are darn near unbeatable. There's been some boss fights that I struggled so hard with, going through different builds, and the second I found the right build, in like 30 seconds, I annihilated the boss. And that felt so different than like mastering a pattern in like Bloodborne or something. And then when you take out that boss, you feel like you learned a lot. This game is definitely a lot more like plug and insert certain weapon here, and it'll help you out at the end. Anyways, you guys, those are my final tips. That's what I got for you. Make sure to have fun. Make sure to like take advantage of a lot of the mechanics the game offers you. And yeah, overall, let me know down below if any of these tips you think helped you. If not, it is what it is. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys on the next video.